The dust has settled on the 1.0 release of Darkest Dungeon 2. We've had about a month to do our science experiment on these heroes and come to some conclusions. But now it is time for those conclusions to be made manifest in the form of a heroes tier list. So without further ado, let us discuss the good, the bad, and the ugly of all of the heroes of Darkest Dungeon 2. My goal is to keep this video relatively brief, but I cannot begin it without my standard disclaimer that tier lists are bad. Why do I say that? Because when you're dealing with a game like Darkest Dungeon 2 or any of the games that we play on this channel, the depth and complexity of those games cannot be boiled down into an A is greater than B, B is greater than C. It ignores so much of the nuance and so much of the situationality of what makes these games so great and what makes these decisions so difficult. That being said, I think that there is real value to being forced to make difficult decisions and question the evaluations that we have historically made. So to that end, I think there is great value in tier lists in the sense that they force us to do a thing that is hard and also sponsor a lot of awesome discussions. So I look forward to hearing from all of you in the comments about why I underrated your favorite hero and overrated a hero that you think is absolutely trash. The other thing that we need to talk about before we get going is what I am evaluating these heroes based on. And I've come up with 5 points that I put in the lower left-hand corner there, but what it boils down to is their overall kit. Are their skills good? Are their skills great? Do they have exceptional skills? Do they have terrible skills? Then their role and rank flexibility. What is the purpose of this hero? And how much flexibility do they have? Can they kind of do 2 roles? Do they really only do 1 role? Are they really just a damage dealer? Do they really only put dots? Are they a healer? Are they a support? And then beyond that, how good are they at those roles? That's role fulfillment. So are they an exceptional healer? Are they a great damage dealer? Are they an okay damage dealer? Then there's power progression. And to me, the other way to put this is kind of like, how much do you have to invest to get good stuff out of them? The investment can be in the form of trinkets or mastery, but at the end of the day, we invest our resources into these heroes and we get sometimes an outsized positive result and sometimes not so much. Not all mastery is created equal. And then last but not least, problem solving. When I think about Darkest Dungeon 2, I think about a game that is constantly presenting you with problems that you need to have solutions for. The general fight, as an example, has a taproot that you need to be able to hit from time to time in order to control the tempo of the fight. If you don't have an answer for that problem, you're going to have a bad time. Some of these heroes are significantly better at answering the problems that the game presents than others. But without further ado, we've already talked too much. Let's get into the tier list, and we're going to start out with the Grave Robber. The Grave Robber is pretty much a damage dealer with some nice self-sufficiency rolled in. Things like Absinthe and Dead of Night make her a decent stress healer for herself, a decent self-healer. And then she has a lot of great damage abilities. Lunge has a relatively high crit rate, does a pretty solid amount of damage when she hits with it. She has a nice little side of Blight with Poison Dart, which is an incredibly flexible ability that can hit multiple different ranks. Pirouette, I'm not super in love with. I think that some of her other things like Shadow Fade, I don't like losing the tempo that comes with enabling them. But overall, I think that she is relatively focused on being a damage dealer, but she does a pretty darn good job of dealing damage. So I'm pleased with her. In terms of power progression, I think that you can get away with just upgrading a few of her skills, and she performs relatively well. You get Poison Dart, Lunge if you're going for kind of like a movement type of thing, and you're pretty much off to the races. She does really well with like crit style trinkets, especially like the Heartseeker trinket, just because her crit rate is relatively high. You add a little bit more, and then you're going to have an engine of great damage that's also doing some stress healing for you. So I like the Grave Robber. I'm going to put her in B tier because I think she's a little one note. She does well in juggle comps. She does okay in non-juggle comps. So moving on, next we have our fair Hellion. The Hellion has an okay kit. I think the changes that were made to it have made the Hellion's kit a little more complicated. She used to be very simple to understand. She used to be a frontliner that took Howling End, Wicked Hack, and Iron Swan and just went to town on whoever she could hit. Now she has a bit more of like what I would call like a negative shuffle identity to her, in the sense that now she has both winded and shuffles that are generally putting her out of position rather than moving her into position. Where with lunge, I see that as like a great potential shuffle. I see Howling End moving her back as kind of like taking her out of the place that she wants to be, so then she has to spend a skill with, say, like toe-to-toe to get back into that rank 1 where she's going to be doing more damage and have more flexibility. As a tank, I think she's pretty mediocre. I don't really like running Hellion tanks. I think spamming toe-to-toe feels very one note, but it's really the only place that you're getting taunt from. You can mix in a few other things. Toe-to-toe removing winded is nice, but she doesn't add a lot of utility to the equation. I do think that in terms of like power progression, you can get away with just upgrading toe-to-toe and then her damage abilities, and she's going to be relatively effective. And she does okay with trinkets, but she doesn't fully benefit from them quite as much as some of the other heroes. I think I like her as high C tier because she solves some good problems. I think Iron Swan targeting rank 4 is great. She has good damage. But as far as a tank, I think she's a little on the lower end. And I've been running her a lot lately, and I'm not always thrilled with her kind of like rank 3 blind spot and the fact that she really only likes to be in rank 1. But that brings us to the Highwayman. The Highwayman has a great kit. Pistol Shot, Take Aim, Grape Shot Blast. These are all like class-defining abilities. Getting 2 crit tokens off of Take Aim is simply phenomenal. It means that the Highwayman kind of like doubles as a light stress healer, can often be critting in times when you desperately need them, has insane flexibility on targeting, with Pistol Shot being able to hit ranks 2, 3, 4, and the ability to hit rank 1 with Grape Shot Blast. I think that generally speaking, I really, really like the Highwaymen. They are strictly a damage dealer, but they are a very, very good damage dealer. To that end, I think I put them in A tier just because they are a little one note. Basically, I'm always running them as a sharp shot. I'm either putting them in the front rank to get some cheeky point blank shots, although that I think is not the best way to utilize them, and then mostly focusing on Pistol Shot and mixing in some take aims to get a little bit of stress healing out of it. I like the Highwaymen. They don't completely blow the doors off, but I think they are up there. That brings us to the Jester. Oh, the Jester's kit is pretty awesome. I think that there's kind of 2 sides to it from my perspective. There's like a support side and there's a damage and utility side. Encore is an ability that kind of single-handedly is defining for the Jester, because getting 2 actions with any other hero can be a massive difference maker, and it can come in so clutch. Opening fights with 2 play grenades can be game changing. Using Encore so that you can do a take aim into a big crit with a Highwayman, again, is a huge difference maker. So Encore by itself makes the Jester pretty incredible. Then you have the stress healing aspect / support aspect. Inspiring Tune remains one of the best stress heals in the game. And it is just, the utility is really, really there. And then as a damage dealer, we love the bleeds that come from Slice Off and Harvest. We also love Fade to Black. Being able to apply a blind and a combo when it is upgraded is just really, really, really useful. So has a handful of roles, damage dealer and support / stress healer. Is pretty flexible in where they're located. They thrive in juggle comps, which is really nice because sometimes you get juggled when you don't want to. In terms of power progression, Fade to Black and Inspiring Tune really want upgrades if you're going to be rolling them. But other than that, the Jester can get by for a while without too much and really doesn't need any trinkets to be at maximum power. So the Jester to me is an easy S rank. Solves a ton of problems through Encore, kind of like takes on all of the problem solving of other heroes, but also just does a lot of work. Now, the Leper. The Leper is a tough one for me because I know I overrate the Leper, and that will probably be reflected here. So let's talk about the Leper's kit. The Leper's kit for me is largely defined by Intimidate, which is like one of the best skills in the game from my perspective. It is hit any rank, apply a weakness to that enemy if you hit them. But if you're not hitting them, you're potentially stripping a block token, you're stripping a dodge token, and you're getting 2 taunt for it. Like, Intimidate is just probably the best single tanking ability in the game, up there with Retribution on the Man-at-Arms. The problem, though, with the Leper's kit is that Chop and Hugh, even on a Tempest Leper, aren't really doing the job. You're getting big numbers, but you're investing a lot in getting them. You're consuming valuable combo points, and you're generally not doing that much damage, which is why I usually build my Lepers Poet, because I like the larger health pool, and I like the sustain that comes from massive solemnities and using Reflect. The Leper is insanely good at dealing with their own stress, which to me makes them a pretty excellent tank. Early in the fight, you're spamming Intimidate to kind of like do what you need to do. And then later in the fight, you're using Solemnity and Reflect to kind of clean things up and get yourself back to a solid baseline. For this reason, I think that the Leper is, for me, up here in B tier. And this may ruffle some feathers because I think there are a lot of Hellion stands out in the world. But I think what it comes down to is that the number of death blows that I've gotten from Intimidate is off the charts. Just having that flexible attack when you need it, being able to generate taunt while also doing that damage makes them really good. I like my Lepers as, meat shields. Basically, I'm not trying to build them to be super strong hard hitters. The occasional Tempest Leper is fun, but I don't think it's the optimal way to play the Leper. And I do think that they are a great tank. Their power progression is insane from my perspective. You don't need to upgrade anything on a Leper for them to be an absolute monster tank for like an entire run. You pick up Solemnity eventually because the extra stress healing is nice, but if you pick up things like a Reverberating Redoubt, the Leper just becomes this like unstoppable taunt meat shield who has extra actions to throw around. And I think they are exceptionally good. Far, far and away better than the Hellion as a tank. And the Hellion as a damage dealer, we've already discussed some of the reasons why I think they rank slightly lower. But that brings us to the Man-at-Arms. The man, the myth, the legend. The Man-at-Arms is just really good. I don't know how else to put it. The Man-at-Arms kit is really, really strong. You have Retribution, which is probably the best tanking ability in the game if you don't mind some downtime on your taunt. If you want to build them so that they have the path that gives stand fast taunt as well, you have the ability to build them with 100% taunt uptime if that's important to you. They make a passable off stress healer. Bolster is good enough. It's not quite as good as what we're rocking on the Jester or the Flagellant, but it is very solid. And then defend, is just really, really solid. It is a great ability for saving a life here and there. In terms of rank and role flexibility, the Man-at-Arms is just way more flexible than the Leper. You can really effectively be in rank 1, 2, or 3 with the Man-at-Arms and very comfortably be putting up taunt, doling out some decent hits. Rampart gives them a nice ability to adjust your position. So overall, I think the Man-at-Arms is just like staggeringly strong. Not quite Jester level. I think the Jester is pretty phenomenally good, but still very, very strong indeed. In terms of power progression, I think the Man-at-Arms does require a bit of investment. You want to upgrade Retribution, you want to upgrade Bolster, you want a Reverberating Redoubt, you want a Stone Mount. Like, all of these things are particularly useful. You potentially want Spoken Sharply, but if you get those things, the power progression is kind of off the charts, and their top end is like incredibly strong. In terms of problem solving, they're pretty okay. You have some abilities like Bellow that can push back the Taproot. You have the capacity to handle shuffles if those come about from like a Categorize or something like that. But yeah, I mean, overall, I think the Man-at-Arms is a exceptional tank, the best tank in the game, and it makes me a little sad because I do love my Leper tanks. But moving on to the Occultist. The Occultist is one that I know a lot of people have kind of like mixed feelings on. The reality is I do think that the Occultist needs some buffs. They can be an insane damage dealer just with Ceiling Spaghetti, aka Abyssal Artillery, and Demon Pull, and the occasional Burning Stars. But Burning Stars and the crit on Weird Reconstruction are really the only things that unchecked power plays well into, which makes it a little hard to go for a full unchecked power build. I don't think Anamnesis or Malediction are really effective options for sinking your unchecked power, which makes Chaotic Offering something that I take from time to time, but mostly because the other problem that the Occultist has is that they're not great at hitting rank 1, especially from the place that I usually put them, which is rank 4. The reason that I usually put them in rank 4 is because I usually go for the Warlock path, and I usually have low HP on them. But that being said, they are great at hitting back ranks, which we often really like. They are great at pulling things forward and adding a combo to them with Demon Pull, and Burning Stars can hit for big numbers. That being said, I think I'm going to put them in C tier. There's a bit of lack of flexibility in their kit. They can be a little glass cannony, and they just need a little extra utility to kind of bring them up to that next tier. They definitely need a lot in terms of power progression. You really need to be putting damage trinkets on them. You need to be finding damage trinkets to get them up to the point where their breakpoints are working well against the lower characters. Their role flexibility and rank flexibility is pretty low. I would not use them as a dedicated healer. They really need to be in the back ranks. I don't think that the Aspirant path works for making them more tanky and putting them in the front. They do solve a lot of problems just because they have good backline, right? So they're going to be great for your librarians, for your generals, solid for your harvest childs, but you know, they struggle a little bit. The Plague Doctor. The Plague Doctor's kit is pretty phenomenal. Dots are insanely strong, and the Plague Doctor is like the king of dots. Noxious Blast and Plague Grenade are insane. I think Indiscriminate Science remains one of my favorite heals in the game, just because the removal of negative tokens with a big heal is fantastic. And Battlefield Medicine, despite its limited charges, is solving that, oh, I have a big dot, I'm in the creature den type of problem. Magnesium Rain is also fantastic. Like, if you pick up some suboptimal trinkets from the Sprawl, you can get some pretty insane numbers out of Magnesium Rain as well. But overall, dots are just really strong. Cause of Death for bosses is pretty crazy because of just the quantity of damage that you can put out. But mostly what it comes down to on the Plague Doctor for me is Plague Grenade is insanely good at hitting the ranks that I am most scared of as quickly as humanly possible. It requires very little. I will often make it to the end of runs with my Plague Doctor having very few trinkets and is still insanely strong. If I happen to go to the feeder and pick up some of those Plague trinkets, some of those Blight trinkets, only all the better. But yeah, solves a lot of problems because of that back rank hitting. I think that for me, the Plague Doctor lives firmly in S rank, but probably slightly below the Man-at-Arms. And the reason that I say that is that the Alchemist Plague Doctor comes with a big downside, which is that their hit point pool is wildly small. And it certainly has been the death of some of my cycle attempts that your Plague Doctor gets hit by a Walking Death, and it is literally like a one-shot. Puts him on death door, gives him a bleed. Bad news bears all around. Yeah, but Plague Doctor, phenomenal. Great flexibility, amazing healer, great damage dealer, probably like one of the best damage classes in the game, and just generally looking strong, looking fit. So that brings us to the Runaway. I want to love the Runaway, but there are a few things I think holding her back from being particularly exceptional. In terms of her kit, she has what I think is one of probably the best debuff style skills in the game. I think just the best. It's Smokescreen, and it is 2 blind, a vulnerable, and a combo when upgraded, and it is insane. That ability with the flexibility of being able to be used in 2 through 4 means that you can just be doling out blinds all the time, and it can really neutralize a lot of high value targets. Beyond that, she's all about lighting things on fire, and so she has Dragonfly and Firefly, which is basically like she's in the back and she hits the back ranks, or she's in the front and she hits both the front ranks. Abilities. They are good, not great from my perspective. Certainly she can put out some big numbers. Some of the largest dots I've ever had are at the hands of the Runaway, but she often runs into this kind of like funky middle ground where she is in rank 2 and can't hit the back, or she's in rank 3 and she can't really hit the front very effectively. And that split means that her flexibility is a little bit low. She also has the problem that as a healer, she doesn't have a way to create the bleeds that she needs for Cauterize. So she has a hard time being a solo healer. She clearly pairs beautifully with Ravagers, with Occultists, although if you're healing with Occultists, you're potentially in a bad way. But overall, I think that she just does a lot of things kind of okay. Dots are definitely strong, but she is not on the same level as the Plague Doctor by any stretch of the imagination. And Arsonist comes with a really nasty downside of the fact that she can get burned by it, and you don't necessarily have a way to handle that burn, which means often she gets kind of like ground down. Also, because she doesn't have any like bigger back rank things, she's not great at taking out the general. She's awful against the librarian, like truly categorically terrible, which means that there's some places where you really don't want to take her. And I think that needs to be addressed with her kit. I'm going to put her in D rank just because someone has to be down there. But I think overall, she's just being held back by the fact that she has kind of like a weird kit in terms of where she can use what abilities. And she struggles. She really needs a lot of mastery to get going. She needs to get those upgrades to get those dots bigger. But the payoff at the end of them isn't always everything I hoped it would be. That brings us to our sister in battle, the Vestal. The Vestal, I like, but I wish I could like a little more. So in terms of her kit, I think her consecrations are excellent, with a bit of a caveat. So I think Fortitude in particular is great because any source of improved dodge is really, really nice. The problem that I have with her offensive consecration is that it gives strength tokens that I often already have a source of. Like if I have a smoldering hymnal or something like that, I don't really need them. So sometimes I feel like I'm wasting a lot of strength tokens by putting that on, and by putting that consecration on my highway person, my highwayman, or my my occultist. But overall, that's not the only thing that she's doing. I will also say, though, before we finish talking about those buffs, they only really work, in my opinion, for the Seraph, because the Seraph path makes them round-based as opposed to being like trigger-based. The trigger-based means that in juggle comps, you can really quickly blow through your consecrations, and it doesn't feel great. But with the Seraph, it feels amazing in juggle comps. Overall, her kit, I think, is just a little slow as a damage dealer if you're using Judgment or any of her other conviction consumers. It takes a while to build them up. As a tank, the fact that she lacks a taunt, like without a trinket, means that she's in a really rough way. So I think she's good at a lot of things, but the only place where she really excels is her healing. Divine Comfort and Divine Grace are exceptional. I think Mantra is sometimes a little awkward to utilize, but I think she is good. I think she is strong. She fits in a good place. But I think that place is probably down here in kind of like the B tier. She doesn't do anything like super exceptionally, and I think she could use just a little bit of tweaking and buffing upwards slightly to really be in that great place. I also think she's a very bad problem solver. She doesn't have great damage. She's not great at pushing back any of the like growth on the general. She doesn't have super flexible targeting. If you put her in the back, she's not really hitting the front ranks. There's a lot of things that are a bit of a challenge with her. Now, the newest kid on the block, the Flagellant. The Flagellant, who knows what his name is? I certainly don't. But he is our blighty boy. I think that there's some awkwardness to the Flagellant's kit that I have a hard time putting my finger on, but it doesn't always feel great, because if you want to go for like a tank style, and I often like using them as a tank, more kind of invalidates like half his kit, because you're getting so much healing out of it. Like you're just always healed to full. The meltdown style builds where he becomes toxic feel very hard to enable because they're tearing down relationships. So you don't want a bunch of meltdowns on them. The synergy between Punish and Acid Rain doing damage and more triggering and giving you the health back, I think is really cool. Sepsis is clearly very strong if you kind of build towards it and you have the kind of like holy trinity of someone giving you combo, someone applying blights, and a big enough enemy that it actually benefits you, and at the right moment your Flagellant is low on health. Sepsis can be insane, but there's a lot of criteria associated with it. I should say Endure is phenomenal. And with the right path, Deathless is like one of the best heals ever. Endure is the one where you pull stress onto yourself. You pair that with a virtuoso Jester, and if the Flagellant gets the stress resist, then you can use Endure, and it's just a 3 stress heal if upgraded. In terms of power progression, though, pretty strong. And I would say a solid tank, an okay damage dealer is the way that I think about them, with a nice little bit of utility support. In terms of problem solving, they create a problem in that death can now show up. But I think I put them probably here just above the Vestal. Just because I think good tank, good damage, blight dots are useful and valuable. We didn't even talk about necrosis. It's very hard to get blight in enough places where you can be spamming necrosis, but nonetheless, I think a solid mid-tier character from my perspective. And then last but not least, by any stretch of the imagination, is the Bounty Hunter. Bounty Hunter's hard. What I'm going to say is that I think in their current incarnation, the hiring mechanic doesn't work. There's too much downside to not having one of your heroes out and about for a particular region. You need to be building relationships throughout the regions. And if you use the Bounty Hunter early, you're missing out on kind of like that foundational establishing of relationship. But if you use them late, those are the longest regions and the places where hopefully if you're managing stress, you're going to get the most out of it. In terms of power progression, they just kind of are what they are. They have great damage. They are relatively solid. They don't really solve a lot of problems. You can like swap them in for a Runaway if you're going to the Sprawl. They do have a stun ability with no enabler, which is kind of insane. But I think they're too awkward to place anywhere other than at the bottom. Like I hope that at some point we get modding in Darkest Dungeon and the Bounty Hunter gets retuned and then made a full-fledged hero, because I love the Bounty Hunter. I think they are great from a class identity perspective. I think they are a beautiful class, but they just don't work. I never take them because they throw off so many dynamics of a given run. But that does it. So here's my tier list. It's a little imbalanced. If we were going to make some final tweaks, I don't think the Grave Robber comes up to A tier. Because I think she is a tier below the Highwayman. So I think it remains this way. I think this is our tier list for the current state of 1.0. I'm really hoping that we see some buffs for the Runaway, some buffs for the Occultist. The Hellion just still needs a little sauce. I think the problem with the Hellion is too many things that cause Winded, not enough ways to get rid of Winded is a big problem for her. But generally, just that rank 3 blind spot feels pretty difficult to handle as well. But that's it. If you like videos like this, please hit like on the video. If you are interested in more content like this, let me know what particular content you're interested in and toss me a sub so that you will be notified when it comes out in the future. But other than that, that's been me, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye-bye.